Good evening, everyone. Let's call this meeting to order. This is very strange to hear my voice echoing so much. Welcome, everyone. Since this is our first meeting back in person, I will go ahead and read our little reminder to the public that if they wish to speak, they need to complete a speaker form that is found out in the lobby on a table, and you can turn it into Kim, and we'll pass it down. And during community comment, you may speak to the board about topics relevant to the district. All community comment directed at non-agenda items and agenda items shall take place at the beginning of the meeting during the community comment section of the agenda. Before we get to that, I would like to take a moment and recognize last week saw the death of a student in our district. Naji Honda was a kindergarten last year at Wickham Elementary, and so if you would please join me in a moment of silence to remember Naji. Thank you. Okay, thank you, everyone. I appreciate that. And before we get started, I would like to mention for all those that are watching this in a recorded format after the fact, we are investigating how we can best do a hybrid model meeting where we can do Zoom and in-person at the same time or something to that effect. We just need to do probably some physical upgrades to make that happen. So we'll be looking into that and hopefully have that available in the near future, but don't have a current timeline on that. And my partner in crime over here reminded me that I should probably introduce the folks at the table since haven't sat at the table in a really long time. And special welcome to Superintendent Degner. It's his first time in the chair at the board table since we're back in person, so welcome, Matt. But joining me up here at the table, we have Directors Dromi Etsy, Janet Godwin, Ruthina Malone, J.P. Clausen, Charlie Eastham, and we have Recording Secretary on the end, Kim Colvin, and Director Lisa Williams is joining us on the phone. She's waving at you. You can't tell. All right. With that, we can move into our community comment portion. Thank you for your interest in the Iowa City Community School District and for your willingness to share your comments. You're reminded to give your name, address, and topic on which you would like to speak. During community comment, persons may speak to the board about topics relevant to the district. All community comment directed at non-agenda items and agenda items shall take place at the beginning of the meeting and shall be limited to 4 minutes per speaker. With that, we can get started. First up is Joseph Dobrian.
I'm Joseph Dobrian. The reason I'm addressing you tonight is that I have no children in the Iowa City school system. The other day I was talking with a friend who is much younger than I am, who does have children in our system. She and I differ politically. She is pretty left liberal, and I am so conservative I fall off the edge of the flat earth. But she shared with me that even as liberal as she is, she feels uncomfortable with the promotion of certain sexually based lifestyles and racially based agendae that she says are foisted on her children in the classroom and in extracurricular activities within the school system. She told me, I just want my kids to get through. I want them to complete their education without any problems, and I don't want to create any problems for them. So I don't dare speak up about this because I don't want my kids to be harassed by other kids and be told that their mother is a homophobe or a transphobe or whatever. Now, when my friend said this to me, I told myself there must be thousands of parents in this district who are in the same quandary, concerned, if not downright appalled, by the values that their children are being taught in the classroom, but intimidated into staying silent for fear that their children will suffer if they speak up. I went to the school district's website and I read the latest Cultural Diversity and Equity newsletter. I was horrified by its inflammatory rhetoric, its falsehoods, and its invidious assumptions. Reading it, I resolved to do what I can to expose the indoctrination that students in this district are undergoing and the abundance of resources that are apparently spent on this effort. I have no children. I don't depend on Iowa City for my income. I've already been blacklisted by various local organizations on account of my political views. I don't have much to lose. So I put you on notice that henceforth I will speak up at these meetings for as long as I have the strength to get here on behalf of the parents in this district who have at least implicitly been warned to shut up or else. Be seeing you.
Thank you, Joseph. Next up, Dina Bashara.
Hello. Nice to see you all in person. Hope you're not sick of me yet. I'm kind of sick of doing this, though. I'm here once again to advocate for students with disabilities. According to the Press Citizen, since 2015, students in the special education program have made up about 9% of district enrollment and 41% of students suspended on average. Isn't that curious? Wouldn't you like to know why that is? Do you think that a disparity this huge is worthy of inquiry? Because somehow this has persisted year after year, and apparently nobody noticed, cared, asked why, or endeavored to correct it. And in fact, as you know, we were told that no disparities even existed. Tonight in your work session, you will be presented with the social, emotional, behavioral health and rethinking school discipline document. We need the following from our leadership, please. Intellectual curiosity. Why is this happening? Are students with disabilities being disciplined for behavior that is in fact a manifestation of their disability? If students with disabilities are not actually just being disciplined for being disabled, why then are they being disciplined so disproportionately? Are we wondering what the data looks like for our disabled students of color, for our low-income students with disabilities? Because I'm going to go out on a limb and venture a guess that it don't look good. Answering these questions requires the board and the administration to plumb the depths of the issue and to look at the data granularly in terms of intersectionality and also by building and grade in order to analyze the true nature of this problem in a meaningful way. Second, a plan. There are surely multiple complex variables at play here, and until the program is seriously analyzed, which it has not been, we need a stopgap. I strongly urge the district to immediately begin performing manifestation determinations for students with IEPs well before they hit the magic number, at which point it is required by IDEA. The purpose of the determination is to evaluate if a student's disciplinary violation is in fact a manifestation of their disability. While the IDEA does not require it until the 10th day of suspension or something to that effect, there is nothing to prevent the IEP team from initiating the process much earlier. And guys, given the place we're at, I think this seems like a no-brainer. Third, accountability. What teams are responsible for addressing this issue and transparently tracking progress? Fourth, acknowledgement. Public acknowledgement in the Rethinking Discipline document of the reality that students with disabilities have been disciplined disproportionately, significantly, for years. From a 2019 longitudinal study published in Justice Quarterly, a journal of the Academy of Criminal Justice Sciences, with every suspension, students' feelings of connection to the school weaken. They become more likely to have friends who are also delinquent, and their family bonds suffer too. When you're getting punished in school or sent home, it can lead to dissolution of these bonds to the school. That may promote resentment, anger, frustration, fear, anxiety. All these internal mechanisms that don't set up students for success. In other words, this isn't just because a problem just because the numbers are not fair. These are real children. They come from real families. Exclusionary discipline isn't just a bummer. It is bad medicine for children that need positive relationships with caring adults who already suffer trauma, maybe as a result of their disability. And I'm sorry if I'm getting emotional, but I'm tired of doing this. These students are more likely to end up incarcerated as a result of being suspended. We're doing harm to our babies, real children from real families in your community.
Thank you, Dina. Appreciate it. All right. That was all for community comment. We can move on to our next item, which is our agenda approval, and I would entertain a motion.
I move that we approve tonight's agenda.
Second.
All right, Kim?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
All right, thanks, Kim. Next up, we have our consent agenda. Were there any questions from directors on the bills?
I reviewed bills, Sean, and did not have any questions.
Kind of looking around, this is weird. Yeah, look side to side instead of at my little boxes on the screen. Are there any items that directors would like to pull from the consent?
I'd like to pull number 3.
Anything else, directors? All right, I would entertain a motion to approve consent minus item number 3.
I move that we approve consent agenda minus item number 3, which is the personnel report.
Second.
All right, any further comments from directors? All right, Kim, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
All right, thank you. So we can go to item number 3, the personnel agenda. JP?
Yeah, I guess I'd just like you folks to explain a little bit about the fellow program and kind of what that's all about that we see in here before we vote on that.
Yeah, Chase is going to highlight that for us. We're excited to talk to you a little bit about that. Turn it over to Chase to
Sure, agreed. Thank you, Board Member Clausen. I really appreciate you pulling this because we are very excited about our admin fellowship program. It's, I think, the first plank that we can honestly say we've gotten off the ground of our Grow Your Own program. A couple of years ago, we started rolling out our different Grow Our Own strategies, and one of those was moving, in particular, teachers of color into admin roles and letting them have those experiences. We have 4 planks: our current students to teachers, support staff to teachers, and then current teachers to admin. Given the way the ESSER funding works and that ability to use that for some of the professional development, we had an opportunity to jumpstart the program. And so what we did is we advertised for what we're calling admin fellows, a 2-year experience that allows individuals to really participate as administrators in buildings. We didn't want the licensure piece to be a barrier, and so it's a fellowship because it's not technically an administrator, so that individuals can get an opportunity to see if administration is the path they want to choose, get experiences in different buildings is why we went for 2 years. We had over 40 applicants, and we ended up selecting 12 fellows for the program, and so you see those individuals listed as part of the report tonight. During the work that we did, and Amy was a big part of this as well, there were a lot of people that were very influential, and so it's been a true team effort. We got a lot of feedback that there was interest in maybe exploring some of the departments here at the ESC, and so we're selecting 1 more fellow this week to round out the cadre. It's going to be an ESC-based fellow, so the individuals get the opportunity to spend time working with our various departments here, both on the teaching and learning side and the operations side of the house. So while we're excited about this, I think what's even more exciting for me is that this is really truly our first large step on our Grow Your Own efforts. We continue our conversations with the university, and hopefully we'll get to share more of these stories with you about our Grow Your Own programming over the coming months and years.
Great, thanks so much.
Any further questions or comments from directors on that? I think it's a great program.
Yeah, it's exciting. Thanks for sharing. So I move that we approve the personnel agenda, item number 3.
Second.
All right, Kim?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
All right, thank you. Our next item on the agenda is a public hearing for Wood Elementary, and I will turn it over to Vice President Malone.
Now is the time and place for the public hearing on the proposed plans and specifications for the Wood Elementary siding replacement project. The Board of Directors set the date for this public hearing on June 22nd, 2021. Notice of public hearing was published in the Iowa City Press Citizen on June 23rd, 2021. The district will receive bids on this project at 2:30 p.m. July 29th, 2021 at the physical plant office located at 1137 South Riverside Drive, Iowa City, Iowa 52246. Notice to contractors was published as required by law in multiple statewide plan rooms and on the Iowa City Community School District website on June 23, 2021. Are there any questions from the board? Are there any questions from the public?
All right, we can close the public hearing. Thank you, Director Malone. Next item, we move down to our discussion items, and we're going to look at draft ballot language for this fall. And I don't know who wants to kick this off. Are you doing, Matt?
Really briefly, so thank you, President Isom. As we approach this fall and the November election, we've had conversation around gearing up for a second facility master plan. And part of that is putting ballot language, asking the community to support extending our revenue purpose statement and the PEPAL levy that the district has access to. And so I'll turn it over to Chase or Les from there to provide some additional detail. But this has been similar language that the operations committee looked at their last meeting.
I'll just continue the brief overview before I turn it over to Les for the specifics. As Matt mentioned, we took this to the operations committee earlier in the month. If Lisa was here, I'd let her talk, but I'm sure she's okay if I give a quick summary. When we visited about it at the operations committee, we originally brought forward PEPAL, SAVE, the RPS for SAVE, and then also PEARL. Given where PEARL currently sits at the state level in terms of the consideration that some legislators have put forward about getting rid of it, and also understanding that it's a different dynamic than the other two, that the PEARL is actually something we haven't had before, so we'd be asking for the voters to implement something new, as opposed to the other two being ones that it's just a continuation. The recommendation out of the ops committee from both the board and the administration is that we look at just keeping PEARL on the back burner and not putting it forward in November. And so what Les will walk you through tonight is just the background on the resolution language for SAVE and PEPAL. Les?
Thank you, directors. The language has been drafted by Beth Grobe from Allers in Des Moines. She was a part of the draft process for our documents in the RPS in 2015 when we previously had it voted. So it is written in such a manner that it provides the district with the utmost in flexibility in terms of how we would expend those funds, with the focus being on FMP 2.0, but as well it covers technology, it covers our family resource centers, just like we currently have. And so we're just extending the current language. The current RPS expires in 2029, and you're going to say to yourself, why would we vote to extend it now? If we want to look to finance FMP 2.0, we need to open up the penny sales tax past 2029 through 2050 to leverage that and provide that borrowing capacity. And so this RPS will extend that, will be extended out till 2050 and allow us then to access those funds to fund the FMP 2.0. The PEPAL voter-approved levy is the $1.34 levy. It's been in place. I believe it's been in place the entire time I've been in the district, so that's at least 28 years, so I haven't went back further than that. But, and so it would be a continuation of that same levy. The current PEPAL levy provides about $12.5 million to the district to support all of the projects that we do, the life cycle projects that you approved in March, and you know, the rental of the swimming pools, our school bus lease, all of those type of things, as well as maintaining our $650 million worth of buildings, comes out of PEPAL as well. And so this is just an extend that. It currently expires in 2025. Again, you're saying, well, that's a little over 3 years, about 4 years away. Extending that for another 10 years also opens up that for the borrowing capacity for the FMP 2.0. And so it has a lot of opportunities for the district by extending those. If FMP 2.0 does not move forward, we don't lose anything by having the levy approved or either one of these documents approved. So it just provides the district with the greatest flexibility as we plan in a thoughtful and important way for our students and staff to serve our students in the district.
Any questions or comments by directors? I don't know, I know Lisa's on the phone. I don't know if she wants to start. It might be easier if I call on her if she has anything to say.
No, thanks. I thought Chase and Les did a great job of summarizing it. We had a conversation in the ops committee about the pros and cons. I'll defer to Charlie and Janet there in person to summarize that conversation, but I think there's a good summary of where we're at before the board.
Thanks, Lisa. No.
I honestly don't have a whole lot to add. I think Chase and Les, you summed it up really nicely and captured the conversation that we had, and I think it was last week. Les, can you remind us when, if this passes in November, when would we be able to start borrowing against those dollars?
We would be able to start borrowing against those dollars right away as soon as it's passed. You know, the PEPAL would be the property tax, so we wouldn't want to put anything in place until the 22-23 school year, in which we have the collections to match that. But most of the borrowing that we would do against either of these sources would be beyond what we currently have borrowed against the FMP 1.0 projects. And so it will be out in those windows of 25 to 35 for the PEPAL dollars and 29 to 2050. It's hard to throw those numbers out there, but it's about 30 years out into the future, and so that's what we're looking at. So, you know, one of the discussions we had, and it may have been you that asked the question, Janet, I don't remember for sure, about borrowing that far in advance, and I guess you can kind of compare it to your own personal situation when you borrow against your residence. Most people go with a 30-year mortgage when they start out with, and so that would be a parallel to what the district is doing for the future of our schools versus what you would do personally. So,
Yeah, thank you. It really is, I think, from the Ops Committee standpoint, an important step for us to ensure that we've got funding capabilities for FMP 2.0 that we're actively working on with the community in terms of defining what those priorities are. And so, and the description around PEARL, I think, is something we also talked about. The board has discussed going after PEARL before, but for me, the compelling argument was the uncertainty with the state level, and then not having to ask voters for additional levy. And so we're basically where we are right when we go to the ballot. We're status quo going forward by extending these. So I think that's very compelling, and I think we've had a good history in our district of funding, you know, school building activity. We know how important it is for our district, and I think this makes a ton of sense. And that was sort of a little bit of the conversation from Operations Committee.
Right, and appreciate you bringing that point up. Again, that was a part of what we talked about in operations, is I think for our community, just knowing it's an extension of what's already there, right? There's no new ask. You know, something we talked about in the second facility master plan that we're proud of is there's, you know, no need for a second bond. And so these are really just extending existing levies in place. And so, you know, having PEARL in that conversation would seem to muddy that, you know, point a little bit. And so really it's just extending these two that are currently there and asking people to move forward with those.
There were a couple points of clarification around using these dollars for land purchases. It was a little bit, the language is a little interesting and very specific as we had talked, but there is capability to use these funds for purchasing land for new buildings, right?
Yes, there is, and it's the language that says the purchase of grounds covers land purchases. Beth Grove pulled the language directly from, I believe it's chapter 298.3 of the Iowa Code, so it's just pulling it directly from there.
Thanks, Janet and Lisa and Chase and other people too. And just for the board's information, the Operations Committee was really unanimous in this recommendation for going forward with this very exciting and very worthwhile endeavor on our part to continue our building infrastructure in this district that serves the needs of all kids.
And to extrapolate, I guess, a little bit from what Janet had asked on, you know, when we can start borrowing against it is, you know, we're wrapping up the projects from FMP 1.0, and we're working on coming up with what all the projects are going to be for 2.0. Will there be a gap in construction projects? I know there's always stuff going on, like things need to be repaired and whatnot, but some of our larger tasks, is there going to be a gap there?
So Dwayne, who retired, is actually staying on in a consulting capacity to help us work on that timeline. And so, Sean, part of that's dependent on kind of what we hear from community engagement in terms of how we're going to stack some of those projects. We do know that after, hopefully, if the vote is yes in November, there will be some time for planning. And so depending on when we finish up the current projects, there might be a small gap where construction slows. I don't think it's going to cease completely, but it's obviously not going to stay at the same level it's been over the last several years because we need to go back to the planning phase that we've done in the past. And so I wouldn't say that it will cease completely because we have some other funds that Dwayne's done a nice job of managing so that we're going to be able to continue to make improvements and probably put on some smaller projects or maybe what we'd call bridge projects during that time. But we won't know the timeline in earnest until later in the fall. So our community will see a slowdown, but we don't think it'll stop.
So I want to make sure I got it right. Is it fair to say that there might be a little bit of a gap for planning purposes as opposed to financial reasons, or is it a little bit of both?
I would say it's a little bit of both.
Perspective.
One of the things that we're in this position because we were 2 years ahead of FMP 1.0 or 2.5 years ahead. And so that kind of builds in the gap that you're kind of alluding to, Sean, there. But since none of these projects have been determined yet, they all have to go into a design process. And depending upon what that process is or what the actual project is, some of that design work can be 6 months to 12 months. You think about building a new elementary, if that would be one of the projects. We meet with the building teams and that type of thing to go through that process and then get with the architects and the design professionals to put it in place. And so that all takes time. And so there is some lead time there. And we would take advantage of that time to do all of that planning. And then when the funding mechanism is fully in place, then we can go ahead with those borrowings and start to put the shovels in the ground and get to work.
Yeah, I say that, I guess, to maybe illustrate that when we did vote to accelerate the FMP, one of the great things that came out of it was significant cost savings, which is probably why we are not having to go out for another big ask this fall, and that we can manage it with what we have. And so I know that the feeling is, all right, we're done with these projects, let's get started on these other ones. I want it to be clear as to what we can and can't do, but I think that even with a small gap or just being able to do some small projects still illustrates how well we did in the first phase of it to get us to the point where we are today. So that was the point I was trying to tease out a little bit.
No, and that's a great point, and it's a very positive conversation, and so I want to stay positive, except I think the other side of that coin is, or to your question, what we can tell you is if we don't extend these in November, there will be a gap because we will not have the resources to continue the projects and the improvements and the enhancements and the innovation that we've done to our buildings and to our campuses. And so while there might be a lull, and yes, we are in this position because of the great work that Dwayne and Les and Craig and everyone did, we do need to continue to move forward, but we will not be able to without the community renewing these resources that are currently in place.
Thanks.
Yeah, Chase, I was going to highlight that point that no matter what, we got to, our job, I think, is to get out and really encourage the community to vote yes on both of these questions. So we can not have another 30-year delay before we upgrade our entire district. I don't want to go through that again.
For sure. Any other comments?
I just wonder if we should maybe emphasize for the public too, for the community, that we are engaged in a very intensive community engagement, community advice, community consultation process, which will guide us greatly, or entirely perhaps, in making the decisions that we will eventually make about exactly what to do with infrastructure and buildings and grounds and so forth.
Yeah. Thanks for that reminder, Charlie. Anything else on this topic? All right, thanks everyone. Let's move on to our next item, which is sort of our standing update. We're looking at next school year, so I'll turn it over to Matt.
Yeah, you bet. I think we'll get to skip a meeting here next time on talking 21-22 school year. What we'd like to do this evening is just ask you to look at a little bit of that survey feedback that I included in the agenda item as an attachment, and then the ESSER plan requirements. And so as we've been planning for the 21-22 school year, at the beginning, we highlighted an element of where the ESSER dollars are going as part of our plan. But as we receive guidance and as we receive those dollars, the state then informed us we would need to create a plan that would need to be submitted. The good news for us, the sigh of relief moment a little bit, was the makeup of the plan. If you see what's required there, it's not super intense on what we'll need to provide to the state and the information we'll need to provide. So we feel good about that. But a key part of that is making sure we've gotten input from our different stakeholders. And so that survey is a testament of that. We've been engaged with the ICA and plan to do some teacher small conversations around that. We did administrator conversations and leadership conversations through the spring. And so really in August, what we plan to bring you is a plan that we believe will match the feedback we've seen in those different input sessions, those different input opportunities. If you look at the survey data.
Hey, Matt, before we get into it, I know it's been a while since we've been in here. Is there a way we can get what we're looking at up on the screens for the folks here?
Yeah, Kristen's not here with us tonight, so I was trying to just go with it. But
On the spot?
I'll display it, so.
Sorry.
Do it? Okay, thanks, Kim.
Thank you, Kim.
Yeah, so you have the first, as Kim pulls that up, what you have in the document are the first four survey questions. The last three, we weren't able to provide for you tonight. They include some information. Unfortunately, people took an opportunity to take a shot at several staff members in the district through some of that feedback, so we haven't had a chance to redact that information yet in questions 5 through 7, but we will provide some of that more contextual information to you as well eventually there once we have a chance to kind of thematic base the feedback. But questions 1 through 4, if you look, you see the red bars, and really the top 4 things that you hear our community respond to are mental health needs for our students, the unique needs of low-income students, addressing learning loss, and then ensuring continuity of learning for all students, which I really think is the spirit of where these dollars are intended to go, is how we address the learning needs of our students, and then of course for our structurally disadvantaged students, how we're addressing those especially. So those are the top ones. You do see several other items mentioned here as people express those as needs, and that it's not that they're not needs or not important, but I just tried to highlight a few of the top ones for you as far as the highest response rates. When you go to the second question, and you see the different responses there, again, we asked them to prioritize the different pieces, and it's going to sound pretty familiar on learning loss, mental health, class sizes, and then achievement or access gaps that we have in our system. And so when we think about those things, again, that's the spirit of, I think, what we're intended to do is to make sure our plan and the expenditure of those dollars address those different needs. And so I think you'll be pleased when we show you where the majority of those dollars land when we get to August, and can detail out that plan for you and make sure that we make any adjustments we need to based off this feedback to address things like the class size and learning loss components that have happened, and then how we're intentionally planning for mental health needs. And that'll be part of the conversation we have here at the work session too, which will be some good information to have as well. You can see we had about 1,500 responses on the survey. You could look through some more of those, the questions 3 and 4, if you'd like to. I mean, basically it's a roles question there that asks who completed it. You can see that most of the people that completed it were parents. We did have a nice number of students above our school district staff actually, so that was kind of neat to see. And then, like I said, questions 5 through 7, we'll work to get some themes of that feedback provided as well to account for how we plan that out. So those are kind of the 2 basic components I wanted to talk to you about tonight. We can pull up the ESSER plan requirements if you'd like to see that on the big screen too. That's just the 2 DE guidance documents. We received the last one here on July 1st that talks about the plan that will need to be submitted by August 20th. So
I would only pull it up if you wanted to highlight anything specific in it.
no, I don't think there's anything I need to highlight, but be happy to take any questions you guys might have or anything about processes we've tried to work to put together this ESSER plan over the last several months.
Throw it out there to directors if they have any questions.
I don't think so. I think maybe looking forward to the work session and hearing what we're doing. Mhm.
And I would just say, you know, another piece that we've come back to several times, you know, that about 85 cents of every dollar we have goes into a person. So as we've talked about expending down the most recent allocation around $28 million through ESSER funds, we know those have to go into people. And so the important part of planning for the district is going to be when that influx of those funds goes in 2 or 3 years, do we have an exit strategy for those different positions and things that we've created? And so that's been a big part of our work too, to know what would we be able to sustain because of enrollment growth, what will we be able to absorb because of attrition, or what are we going to have to possibly stop after those 2 to 3 years once that funding source runs out. And so the thing I would just kind of caution the community and our staff around is class size. You know, that might feel good, you know, for a period of time, but it might also revert back to what we've been more accustomed to, or a more normal. The other caution we've kind of continued to share throughout this process is if our enrollment growth comes back, you know, we were down 280 students throughout this year. If it comes back and it comes back with growth, that will also maybe, even though we've tried to address class size on the front end, could put us in a different scenario too, because it could grow back really fast. You know, we could be in a situation there that all of our best planning didn't account for potentially getting back 280 students plus, you know, our usual growth.
So remind me again, they extended how long, or how many years we can, was it just
Yeah, we
2
can
more
go
years?
into an additional fiscal year, so that allows us to expend those dollars into the next school year.
So
It's the
2
23,
school
24.
years?
Is that right, Les? Yeah, 23, 24 it allows us to expend into that school year. We were a little bit worried about especially summer programming from that summer, so there's a lot of advocacy around that if we couldn't do anything that summer, and then when they extended that date, that actually allows us to do that. I think the bigger concern for us would be having to work out of the dollars by that point.
And at this point, it's still, while we have a longer time, it's still a finite amount, right?
Yeah.
Unless some magic happens.
Unless we were able to receive more, but right now it's still the same amount. Yeah.
Any other comments or questions, directors? All right. Anything else on the topic, Matt, that you wanted to touch on?
No, I just thank the team for their hard work. You know, this was another plan, right? I mean, as we've continued to change and adjust, this is the work of this summer. So last summer it was putting together a return to learn plan. This summer it's the ESSER plan and trying to evolve and change. And we've just continued to do that. So I'm super proud of the team and the staff that's all been involved in that work as we continue to go through. And the good ideas, I believe, that have come forward, you know, just like we highlighted one at the beginning of the meeting, and trying to have some creative approaches. I think this is our opportunity to think about as we return to a more normal, but how can we be better in that return to normal? So that's the opportunity in front of us.
Yep. Thank you. All right, let's go ahead and move on to our next agenda item, which is our Director Liaison Report. There's quite a bit of stuff on there. I don't know if there's anything directors wanted to highlight on there.
Yeah, I'll mention, I had a great opportunity. One of the co-chairs of our equity committee, Jane Finch, set up a volunteer opportunity for members of our equity committee to go out and help houses into homes over the weekend. I had just learned about that organization, but just to give a shout out to them, you know, they collect furniture donations and then deliver that to folks who need it. You know, kind of no judgment, no questions asked. And so got to go around in the community and unload a bunch of furniture. And learn about a really great organization. So really support what they're doing, you know, because it's one thing to get folks housing, and then it's another thing, you know, they really try to make it homey. I mean, they're trying to like match furniture and get wall hangings that look nice so folks can really kind of turn that house into a home, like the title says. So that was a great opportunity that I wanted to share.
Thank you for that.
And if you don't mind, JP, I'll just add a couple of comments. For one thing, I really commend you for going with Jane into that, doing that work. I know Selena McCarty has posted on her Facebook page from time to time that that's really hard physical labor, and it's not easy to do. So I really admire you for doing that. And also, I would like to point out to everyone that the houses and the homes, the folks who ask for furniture or contact them for furniture to make their dwelling into a home, half of those folks come from this district. And that's been the situation for houses and homes, which is a 5 or 6, 7 year program now. That's been the situation from the beginning. So I hope we'll continue to publicly support the program and to urge the local funders or other entities here to actually continue to support them financially too.
Yeah, and I would say really it's a lot of that's through the SFAs is where they get a lot of their referrals to our student family advocates. So just a nice example of a partnership, I think, between the private world and what we're doing here in the school district. So
Awesome, thanks. Anything else to highlight, directors? All right, we can move on to our next item, which is our agenda setting. And we have on there our next regular board meeting on the 27th. We actually have an annual operations report. I was going to say we have all the usual suspects, but we do have a few other things on there. And it's never too early to start looking at our legislative priorities. So that's on there as well. But then also all the usual suspects. So are there any items, either directors or admin team, that need to get added on the 27th?
Sean, I'd like to ask if we would agree to add a discussion perhaps by the admin group and the board of recent legislative actions, including the implications for the bringing into the status of a state law, House File 802, which regards parameters for racism and sexism training. And there are three other House files that probably are relevant to us also. House File 744 regarding student free speech, House File 847, education practices, and even House File 868, education appropriations. All of those have provisions which I think will be of interest to us as we go forward here. So I'd like to add that as a discussion item, perhaps.
I mean, I would throw it out there if people feel, knowledgeable about them, to have that conversation. And I don't know if it's worth it to have it as a standalone discussion item or discuss it within the context of legislative priorities.
Yeah, Sean, interject here a little bit. So Charlie, thanks for bringing that up. And I think we could potentially couple this with your legislative priorities if you wanted to. And so a couple considerations I'd ask you guys to think about would be the 21-22 school year item, and then legislative priorities and legislative update we take at that first August meeting. I think there is a need for a conversation around the legislative update. We've received about 80 pages of guidance based on those new pieces of legislation, and so there's some things I know that our staff has questions about. I'm sure our community has questions about surrounding Pledge of Allegiance, like Charlie talked about racism and sexism training. And so as we work through that in the coming weeks to understand the DE guidance and receive their webinars about additional context, I think it would be good just from a public relations standpoint to have a conversation around those at our early August meeting, and then cue into our staff what kind of opportunities they'll have coming up to hear more from us as we begin the school year, as well as so parents know what their students can expect with those changes. So if we could maybe take the 21-22 school year item as far as what the ESSER plan looks like and that legislative conversation that first meeting in August, I think that'd be well timed.
I think that's fine. I know we're going to be a little light up here at the table that meeting. So those are topics that probably warrant all of us being here. So I'm okay with pushing that to the first meeting in August. It does have a pretty light agenda there, which I'm not opposed to, but if there's something else we wanted to try and fit in, I'd be okay with that too. Maybe we could get maybe a quick update. Maybe it's going to be in the operations report, but maybe just a quick update from some of the community engagement around FMP 2.0, just kind of see where we're at maybe a little bit.
We talked about that at Ops Committee, I think, of doing that at the first meeting in August.
Doing that in August as well?
Yeah, because the last community engagement is the 3rd, and so we could bring that data back and have the whole set for the board at that next Tuesday meeting, because I think we're going to Black Voices Project on that Monday before, and so we're going to try to do some mini sessions right up until that first board meeting in August.
Right.
Yeah, August 9th is when we'll be at Black Voices Project. So we'll have that session. We could also do that on the 10th. I'm sure Chase would be happy to provide any kind of update around what community engagements happened to date, at that July 27th meeting, if you wanted to do that too, Sean. I thought we So the full data would, like Chase said, would be ready for August 10th.
All right, well, maybe we intentionally keep a fairly light midsummer meeting for our second one in July and really come back at it on the first meeting in August with some, lengthier conversations. Is that agreeable for everyone? All right, I see a lot of head nodding. That's great. So with that, I think we are ready to finish. So I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.